Welcome back to LokadTV. Given the recent release of SkuZ, Lokad's very own supply chain board game, we were eager to discuss the logistics of marrying supply chain complexity with a fun learning experience. Today's guest, Mathias Le Scaon, founder of Zensimu, is an expert in this area. Mathias, welcome to Lokad.
Thank you, Conor, and I'm very happy to be here and discussing gamification in learning supply chain principles.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. And I guess first things first, let's set the table. What exactly does Zensimu do, and why did you start it?
So I've created Zensimu in 2020, and Zensimu aims at creating games to teach various topics in operations. The first game of Zensimu is a supply chain game based on the beer game, and it is played on the web in a digital format. To allow a bit some easier organization and keeping a nice experience. And so Zensimu has been growing since these 3 years, and I'm happy to have both universities and companies using the product.
Well, and why exactly did you choose to focus on supply chain games? I mean, you could have done any kind of online simulations.
Yeah, so my background is actually in supply chain. So I have worked for 8 years in a cosmetics company at various roles in the supply chain, so at production, at distribution. And actually, when I was in high school, I also had fun to program some little games on my own. So after 8 years in that company, I decided to bring together my professional experience in supply chain and also my hobby, that was to create some little games on the side, and that's how Zensimu started.
And were there any specific experiences in your professional career that really inspired you to focus on, for example, the beer game? And I know Zensimu also has a lean game variation.
Yes, so I had played the beer game that many people in your audience probably know already. So that is a very classical supply chain teaching game. So I had played the beer game when I was at university, and the beer game really shows some typical effects of supply chains. And when I was working in that cosmetics company, I could really feel as if I was playing the game. I could feel some of these effects on the production phase, like the uncertainty of lead time, of production, but also the uncertainty in demand. So I could really feel. So that reminded me of the beer game I had played some years ago, and that was like an experience to live it in the real world, actually.
Well, thank you, Mathias. And actually, Joannes, I'll turn to you. We've talked a little bit about the beer game, but do you want to fill in the blanks there for people who actually might not be familiar with the beer distribution game?
Yeah, I think it's almost a century old. I believe that it was something like introduced in a U.S. university. I'm not sure if it was Harvard or another one of the Ivy. It was another one of the Ivy League, maybe. And I think it was introduced in the 30s. I'm not 1% sure, but it's actually positively ancient. And so it's indeed it's quite interesting. But you see, my own take on that is as a software vendor is slightly different. My take is that one of the curse, I believe, of supply chain software is that those things are just, when done the usual way, the mainstream way, are just incredibly boring. Boring. And it has some specific implications, such as it is so incredibly boring that too frequently you end up with, I would say, not the right people running the thing, just because everybody who is, an inch smart just runs away. That's the problem, is that when you have things that are just too boring, is that you I would say, set up adversarial conditions against talent. People just quit on you. They say, you know what, I'm okay to take a lower salary to get something more interesting. So it's so supply chain, by design, it comes with things that are not especially fun. You're managing plenty of problems. It's very demanding. And if you put that on top, if you put, I would say, a dose of enterprise software on top, you have all the conditions to have, something that on a daily basis feels incredibly bureaucratic and dull. And the worst is that it's bureaucratic, dull, and still very demanding due to the ongoing stream of emergencies. So bottom line, I believe that one of the things that where people don't really realize that how Lokad is different is that we have tried to make it the whole supply chain practice at Lokad a lot more interesting. And it might come at a surprise, but Lokad is fairly unusual, for example, in the design of its own software, that we have tried to make it interesting, not in a bad way, in the sense of doing crazy designs or stuff like that, but just on making it intellectually challenging and going to, I would say, certain extremes where most of our competitors do not, probabilistic forecasting. How can we, do things that are beyond what is the average practice? And SkuZ is part of the same sort of thinking of trying to make things, I would say, a little bit more, approachable and less dull, more colorful. It's a very basic things, but if the only things that you vehiculate, as a supply chain vendor is just, more dull, technocratic stuff, it is, what an image and what a reality are you conveying to the greater world? And my experience is that, well, if you approach supply chain, for example, as a competitive, game to be played, it is more interesting. And one thing is that few people realize that supply chains are actually effectively competitive. Your supply chain of your company competes against the supply chain of another one. And thus, this vision of just do the forecast and then orchestrate is wrong on many levels because, well, this is not exactly, just a pure matter of orchestration. There is other people, your competitors, who are doing stuff and that they can potentially undermine whatever you're doing. And so, by the way, that's what we try to convey in this game of SkuZ, was the fact that if you run a supply chain, you compete against other people who also run supply chains.
Well, Mathias, thank you, Joannes. To come back to you, Mathias, I mean, the idea of sort of evolving beyond the original beer game. I actually played around, as you know. I played around with Zensimu's platform, and I saw that there are different flavors of the beer game, pun intended, different flavors. So you have a smartphone supply chain, there's aviation, there's even a vaccine variant. So could you explain, so what are the subtle differences between these? Do they reflect different industrial aspects of supply chain?
Yes, so the beer game in itself, it's already very powerful. So it has, it's very interesting for any type of company or employee to play the beer game, in my opinion. But to make the game a bit more relatable to specific industries or to the persons that are going to play the game. Because if you are building and selling airplanes, for example, maybe playing the beer game, you will feel that's much more easy than building an actual plane. So to make the game, like I said, more relatable, and also it's possible to increase a little bit the level of complexity in the game, but to simulate some other things, such as increasing the length of the supply chain. So you can add, in the typical beer game, you have 4 stages. But in our platform, you can add up to 8 stages to simulate having supplier tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, etc. Having some batch sizing, reducing or increasing the lead time. So you can play around a little bit with this. The instructor can build his own scenario to something that he thinks is relevant to his audience, and maybe simulate something that happened last year, for example, in the vaccine supply chain or in a pharmaceutical supply chain, we have a pandemic happening, and that how do we react against that? So that's the possibility of using a digital platform that you can rather easily customize the scenario.
Thank you, and I will come to you in a moment, Joannes, with this question, because we've done our own game. But Mathias, to pick up on something you said about increasing or titrating up the complexity, it occurs to me if you're designing a game, there's a very fine balance between realism, like reflecting the intricacies and complexity of a supply chain, and fun. If you make it too complex, you decrease the fun. If you make it too simple, then people aren't learning. So as someone, like, this is your métier, how exactly do you find the perfect balance between realism and learning outcomes and fun?
It's one of the key elements to consider when you design your game is how do I make the game both fun and interesting, also interesting to understand and interesting to play, and also having the right learning outcomes. So it requires a lot of trial and error, and of course when I built Zensimu, I also benefited from the experience of the rules of the beer game that already pre-existed. But in each scenario, it's true we have to find the right balance between these notions. And actually, I've played SkuZ during the weekend, and I like the way you have simplified it, and that still keep the key like dynamics of how a supply chain works, but still making it approachable and gamified in a way that is interesting. So you don't have a lead time of 10 weeks, for example. You have a lead time of 3 weeks with also some variability with the dices. So it's I think you found here a good balance between those, and yeah, congrats for that, because it's not easy, and it requires a lot of training, a lot of trial and error to get it right. Yeah.
Well, thank you, and Joannes, to you again. How exactly did you fine tune, as you would say, fine tune the complexity of SkuZ?
Yeah, I mean, we had a couple of iterations to radically simplify. We started with something because the thing is that we wanted to have like a board game. So when you do it with, I would say, a digital medium, you can afford to be literally an order of magnitude more complex, because let's say, for example, counters. If you just want to count stuff, if it's online with the software will do the counting for you. So by the way, for example, the Civilization, the game, it's now known as a 4X video games, but it was a board game before. And the problem with the board game was you have so many things to count that it becomes, it's actually, have a look at what the sort of board, what the Civilization boards look like. It's like madness. I mean, every players had to count dozens of stuff. And so there was like, in your board set, you would have like literally something like 500 coins to count all of those things. So bottom line is that when you want to do a board game, it has to be radically simpler. That's what we tried. And then the thing is that also we were thinking that every card should be through humor, like nudge a point for people. That's what we are trying. So they are kind of small jokes, but we are trying to every card nudge a little points that not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily even connect to the game mechanics. It just it can just be, the phrasing, the image, and whatnot. And then it turned out that for the tuning and balancing, we leveraged the students of the École Normale Supérieure in Paris. We offloaded the case to do actually a small junior enterprise missions, so that they would balance out the points and the mechanics. So we got help from a local university to do that. It was kind of fun.
Matthias, I'll come back to you in just a moment, but I do want to ask, so Joannes, Lokad has a reputation for producing a lot of, let's say, academic-oriented resources, the lectures, the interviews, the articles. A board game, which is, there's no subtext to this comment, but it's not generally seen as being, fitting our MO. So why exactly focus on a board game?
I'm not too sure. You see, I think if I look at the content that Lokad produce, it is, I think one of the things that differentiate us is that we are a lot less serious than the competition. And when I say serious, I mean in a bad way. A lot of companies, they take themselves too seriously, and that kills creativity. You see, that's the thing, is that if you think, oh, we have to be serious, we have to be corporate, we have to be bland, we have to be... what about, imagination, creativity, ingenuity? That the thing is that when you realize that supply chains are competitive, it means that, as long as what you're doing is ethical and fair, everything goes. As long as you're not, you don't damage people or environment, you're doing something that is just, surprising, it's okay. You have the right to just break the rules as long as you're not breaking, people, damage, etc. So as long as you have like good ethics and that you're compliant with the law, it's okay. And so the point that I want to convey here is that I think one of the danger of the way supply chains are practiced is that this seriousness just fosters stagnation. So companies have been doing their same safety stock formula for literally 3 decades, and they are still expecting for the 100% accurate demand forecast that will solve the problem. Hot news, it won't. And you see, that's the thing, is that so here for Lokad, that was just on the surface, it doesn't follow the code of the academic things, but when it comes to the sort of thinking that goes into it, I think it's actually, even if the form differs greatly, the core is actually quite consistent with what we're doing otherwise. We are, again, 99% of the companies would say, oh, we are out-of-the-box thinkers. Yes, and then you do everything exactly like what all your peers have been doing for the last 5 decades. So there is that and that.
Well, thank you. Back to you, Matthias. So I'm aware you also have a lean game. Could you explain the difference there between the beer game and lean game, and what are the learning outcomes of that?
So the lean game is meant to really show in practice how do you apply the lean principles on an actual case. It simulates a little workshop painting some toys, and you need to optimize the throughput and the P&L, so like the financial outcome of that workshop, and you can apply the identify the waste in the workshop and try to reduce them using some lean tools that are rather known, such as one-piece flow, for example, using Kanban to make your process a pull process. You can reduce the changeover times, and you can have also some indications to reduce the errors in the process. So the lean game can be used also by universities or by companies in a lean training program, such as green belt or yellow belt or black belt, or in universities for industrial engineering, production planning. So it's an addition to the beer game that is more around supply chain, how supply chains work, and more in the supply chain world, basically.
Thank you. And when you say that it's used in universities, you mean it's a study resource, or it's part of assessments? How does that fit into the curriculum?
So the students, they will play the game in teams at some point during their course, usually around the middle of the course. So once the teacher has introduced lean, for example, the history of lean, some of the lean techniques, how lean differs from the more classical method of like planning production, etc., such as Taylorism or Ford. They can then play the game to make it more concrete for the students. And also they can see when they play in the workshop before applying the lean tools, they have usually very bad results. And then as they integrate some improvements in the workshop, they can see some of the KPIs that are improving little by little. And they can see how the lean improvements fit well together and how it's an overall methodology that is like important to view as a whole and really see the results at the bottom line. So it's interesting for them to have this view like a bit more concrete.
Thank you. And Joannes, we have collaborations with universities as well, but our focus is on envision, teaching the coding language. Is there any plans to include SkuZ as part of these collaborations?
I mean, we will certainly offer that if there is any university professor that happens to be listening. I mean, please ask us for a couple of sample SkuZ boxes. We will happily oblige. I don't know. You know, it's for now. I mean, contrary to Zensimu, it is very, you know, not the core business. It is more like it was like one of those happy distractions that we do. You know, we have a few random projects that pops up at Lokad. That's one of them. I don't think that Lokad will engineer a big business on top of that. But I would certainly be happy if there are some universities that happen to be benefiting from that. This is, I would say, we are very open, but there is no grand plan around that.
And so, Mathias, in terms of the life cycle of designing these different variants of the games, so for us, I think it was about end-to-end, about 1.5 years.
Yeah.
For a company, about 50 people. Again, we weren't all working on it, but about 1.5 years to design the lean game, you know, from inception to release. How long does that take? How many stages are involved?
So to have a first MVP, I guess it's around 6 months, but it requires, of course, a lot of work. So it's a big investment. And then you can, the advantage of the digital form is that you can always bring some improvements. So there is no like big release date. You can start with a few beta testers and improve the game along the way. So all our games, both the beer game and the lean games, are never fixed. Like they can always have some improvements, always in a good way, of course, so not to go backwards. But yes, to have a first working version, that's around 6 months. But it's this type of project must be well thought out, also to see who is it for, how can is there a community or is there a public for that kind of game. So it's not only about the game, it's also about really who could benefit from it, how do you distribute it, how do you communicate about it, and where does it fit in a class, for example, in a program. So it's not like a light task to launch a new game. It must be well organized.
Are there any differences actually between the flavors that you present to companies? Because again, you collaborate with both universities and companies. Are there any differences in the mechanics or the settings for company tutorials and student tutorials?
There are some, so in general, the learnings are around the same. But the usage is a bit different because in universities they have larger classes. So the way for the instructor to organize his class is a bit different. He will probably need to have like having some links to organize the teams a bit more easily. If you have a big audience, you need to organize your session a bit differently. Also, in universities sometimes they want to have grade for the students. So they want to have a way to extract the results to put a rank on the students. And also the customization possibilities are used a bit more by companies, because universities, they don't really mind having a base scenario that doesn't fit any specific industry, but in the companies they like to have like the name of the plant that is, for example, having the stages in the supply chain really reflect their own supply chain, so they use a bit more the customization possibilities.
And in terms of AI, I know here we talk a lot about AI in supply chain. Is there any place for AI in supply chain games in the near future?
Not at Zensimu for now, not really. However, because AI that would add a layer of complexity, as we said, and for now, I don't really see how we could fit in the scenario. Actually, perhaps if there is an interesting like learning outcome that we could materialize out of it, that could be a kind of scenario we could add. But for now, we try to simplify how the game works, make it really easy for people to understand how do we take the decisions, and even having some very basic MRP formulas from the start of the MRP actually can be even better, because what is interesting in the games is also that you want to simplify reality to then be able to go further. So you need to start with a very basic scenario to then say, by using AI, for example, we could improve this, we could improve this, having better forecasts. For example, in the SkuZ game, you don't know how many customers are going to come out of your hands. But one of the outcomes could be, one of the improvements would be if I can predict how many customers are going to show up or have an estimate, perhaps that can guide my the decisions I will take. So it's nice to have a game that is rather simple in its mechanics, but that still allows people to feel how having more complex technologies could really help in the outcome. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mathias. And actually, Joannes, that presents a nice question, because we finished SkuZ, it's available, we've shipped out the first couple of batches of boxes. But looking back now, are there any changes you would make? Or alternatively, like Mathias, different variations of the beer game, the lean game, is there any variations you'd add in future pressings?
I don't know. Frankly, I don't know. It's again, that was part of the fun of doing SkuZ, was you just take some inspiration here and there, and also it's interesting to sometimes do stuff without having a grand plan. It just let it happen. And I believe that's also true for research and development. I think most of the breakthrough at Lokad started as stuff which is, it looks like fun, I should just try. I don't have a grand plan, I'm not sure what I will get, I will just shake the tree and see if something comes, and sometimes you're satisfied with the results. And again, that was part of my answer to seriousness. The problem is that if you only want, the thing is that if you want to expose yourself to actual discovery or actual innovation, you have to do stuff where you look like a fool sometimes. Most stuff until proven looks a little bit nonsensical. Even, for example, let's say the recent advance in deep learning / AI, they are using models that have more parameters, that have a number of parameters that is absolutely gigantic, and sometimes the sum of the parameters is actually much larger than the data set that is used to train the model. If you go back 20 years ago, people would say, oh, this is insane, you're going to overfit like crazy. It's obvious that if you have that many parameters, you will overfit. So in a way, the early pioneers of deep learning had to accept that they would look like fools compared to the rest of the community, and they did, because they were doing something that was, according to the general understanding of the machine learning at the time, using that many parameters was only a recipe for failure. So you see, that's why I say too much seriousness, it kind of blocks in your mind the very possibility to explore venues. So I think that's something that is interesting. So again, because SkuZ is just, just a small project on the side, on the grand scale of Lokad, it's not, it is relatively minor things. We enjoyed a lot. There is probably some tuning involved where we could have made the penalties for stock out much more severe, but that's I would say more tuning, and probably there would be some tuning for the rules, like if you're a savvy player, where we can do like the hard mode, where because right now most people would finish the game with a profit. We could do the mean version, the mean versions where half of the players would not finish the game, they would just go bankrupt along the way. That would be, just like you have some video games where you can play the I would say the hardcore mode, where if you're dead, your character is deleted forever. You can respawn, that's the easy mode, or you can have like the hardcore mode. That was games like, for example, Diablos. You had that. So. But that's just, random ideas. I'm not too sure if they are any good because they are completely untested. And right now, I think we will probably just listen to people who give us some feedback over the course of the next months, just to see where we should be going on this board game.
Well, Mathias, I presume because this is actually Zensimu's pure focus, I presume in terms of research and development, you always have a stream of projects that you're working on. Are there any that you can talk about, or any upcoming releases?
No, so for now I'm more focused on more like the organization phase for the instructor. How do you improve the organization of your session, basically sharing the links, making that process a bit easier for them. And also working a bit on the lean game to even show even better the results and the learning outcomes, to make it even more clear at the end of the games. But it's a really nice and interesting process. So I'm always happy to think about new potential game ideas, or ways to make life easier for the participants and for the facilitator. So always interesting things going on. Yeah.
Possibly an online version of SkuZ, collaboration with Zensimu, potentially.
I don't know. I mean, I like the physicality of the board game. It's a thing is that Lokad, we are a software company. Everything that we do is digital. I mean, it might be surprising, but again, coming from an enterprise software vendor, the most physical thing that I have is the heat that comes from my graphic card that heat the whole office. But and plus it's a very heavy graphic card as well. But in terms of just having something that you can touch, again, I'm talking of a company that do software, that has been doing software for a decade. For us, I mean, it's quite a lot of fun to, for once, do something that you can touch. We even had, we did some tests to find someone who would print the cards to the quality that we would expect. And you realize that when you test various venues to just get your cards printed, how much difference you can get on seemingly the same thing. In theory, it's the same paper, same ink, same process. You try two companies that will do the printing, and the quality is very different. And same things. So there is all those small nuances. And anyway, it was quite fun. And right now we are just discovering the fun parts of managing to send boxes into the most improbable places on Earth. And you know, worldwide shipping is not exactly quite a solved problem.
No, it's not. But actually, that really is a good point, because there's a dimension to board games. Now, I'm not a huge gamer in general, but I do, like, I prefer physical board games to, let's say, computer games. And I think the reason is there is the social dimension to it, like jeu de société in French, social games. And I'm curious, Mathias, have you ever considered, or have there been any requests for a physical version, like a physical analog of the lean game, for people who actually want to recreate it in person for the social dimension?
So actually, there are some lean games already exist in the market physically. So probably I worked on something that was kind of missing, that was a digital type of lean game. But it's true that it's actually I have also played during my studies too on a kind of Lego, you know, some Lego lean games where you need to build a product. So you have different stations using different colors or different shapes of Lego to recreate a kind of production process. So it's true, the physical experience is also very interesting because it's in 3D. So you have just your vision is more it's like all around you, and you can also have a better interaction with your colleagues. And the digital also has its benefits, such as you get all the results, all the data are calculated automatically. So you have kind of pros and cons on both sides. So depending on how what kind of experience or what are your constraints also, you will choose a different type of game. And for now, I mainly focus on the digital. That is more the strong force of Zensimu today. Yeah.
Mathias, it is our custom to always offer the guest the final word. What would you like to tell people? Any projects you want to talk about from Zensimu?
No, so already thank you, Conor and Joannes, for having me in the Lokad web TV, and I've been following what you've been doing so far, and it's interesting, to have that type of collaboration between a software company that makes like actual planning software, planning tools. Mm-hmm. And me, who tries to really simplify and have a different kind of audience. So we have kind of complementary objectives, congratulations on what you did with SkuZ. I think it was a bold move, but it's really good to have a supply chain game in the market on a paper form. So we needed to have one, and you made it. So that's good to have. And I'm available if you want to all the audience. If you want to learn more about Zensimu and what we offer, feel free to contact me or go on our website.
All right. Well, gentlemen, I think that's about it. Joannes, thank you for your time. Mathias, thank you very much for yours. And thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.